Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
How's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. I am your host, Scott McKay from X and Y Communications. You can find me on social media at Scott McKay with one T on X, on Truth Social, on TikTok, and on YouTube. Also at Real Scott McKay on Instagram and Threads. By the way, guys, don't use Threads. Threads is like the biggest cesspool ever. I mean, it makes old Twitter jealous. Every time I go on Threads, I'm just showing people I vehemently disagree with, probably for good reason. I don't know. I guess that's what some people get off on. Not me so much. So we'll stick to all the other forms of social media for sure. Also, the website is, you know this already, mountaintoppodcast.com. And gentlemen, some of you still haven't joined the Facebook group. That's the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. We're looking for you there. My returning guest, I can't believe it's been 4 years since the first time she was on. This is way overdue. But anyway, my returning guest is Kamini Wood. She's a human potential coach from Apex, North Carolina, which is a Research Triangle Park area around Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. A very beautiful part of the world, I might add. And today we're going to talk about how women define a real man. Kamini, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you again.
Well, yeah, for sure. You're a real woman. So, I mean, we're going to respect whatever you have to say about what a real man looks like. It's kind of a subject that weirdly nowadays is up for grabs totally, isn't it?
It is. And as a mom of two young men, it's something that I hold near and dear about raising real men.
So you are a boy mom and a girl mom, though, aren't you?
I am. I've got 3 girls and 2 boys. Yes.
Wow, that's quite the mix. It's different.
A full house.
And in dogs, too.
I do. I then also have 2 dogs.
Crazy,
We're both
right?
boys.
Oh, well, see, you know, I don't know if you've ever had this conversation in your house about who's outnumbering whom.
Uh-huh. Right? Yes. Yes.
And until my wife's son and my daughter moved out and went on with their lives, you know, we had a pretty even keel around here. Then it was my son, then it was my daughter. And for the longest time, we had a female dog. Now we have a male dog and a female dog and a male cat. So the boys rule and the girls drool now.
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
Of course, ask a cat for their opinion or a tiebreaker vote, and they'll kind of just squint their eyes and turn their head and walk away.
Like a good cat.
Right. I don't want any part of this. Figure it out, right? Anyway, Enough about me. Today we're going to talk about how women define real man. You know, it seems like people are real polarized about this. And like many other things that are basic human principles that get turned into some socio-political argument, it seems like people fall on one extreme or the other. Either a man has got to double down on the toxicity and be real macho and, you know, shoot guns at innocent people and create wars and beat people up and be stoic and never smile or never apologize to anybody under any circumstances. Or else, hey, you know what? Masculinity is purely a social construct. It doesn't exist. And men can be whatever they want. They can even be girls. There's no middle ground. You know what I mean? So what say you on this?
Well, I agree with you. I think that that's the polarization that we live in. It's a black and white or this or that mentality that we have. And I tend to be in the middle. I tend to remind people that there's a whole spectrum in between both of those ends. And for me personally, when somebody shows up as a real man, they're able to hold space for that masculinity as well as the feminine energy. I don't mean femininity as in they're a girl. I just mean that they have the ability to be empathetic and emotional while also still being able to make decisions. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Oh, I would argue they're both masculine, frankly. But what I'm getting at there is when we're talking about men and we're talking about holding space and making decisions, all of that helps us come off as good providers and protectors. And providing and protecting, you know, far be it from anybody to consider those toxic situational elements of masculinity, unless, of course, they're overbearing and I'm going to force you to do what I say to do and I'm going to sequester you in this house and you're not allowed to talk to anybody. That would be a perversion of what's virtuous, and that would be toxic. So, I agree with you wholeheartedly that, you have a lot of men who have a hard time expressing emotion.
Yep.
I think the clinical term for that is alexithymia, right? Men having a hard time expressing their emotions. And that's probably enough of a podcast topic in and of itself. But for sure, when we're talking about a guy being violent and being a threat to others, that's a toxic perversion of the masculinity that's designed to provide and protect.
Yes.
And actually, it's interesting to hear people talk about erasing masculinity and leaving guys with no other message than do better. You know what I mean? Stop being toxic, right?
Right.
And meanwhile, femininity is still pretty much celebrated. Women are told to go out there, bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, and provide and protect for themselves because men aren't worth the investment or they're going to fail you. But women are still bringing the fun, joy, the play, the hospitality, and, well, basically everything we live for on weekends. That's the way I always put it around here. And that masculinity and femininity are designed to blend and complement each other very well, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. And when we're thinking about, being a real man and being in a healthy relationship, it is to hold space for both of those, because at the end of the day, the thing that we have found in order to have healthy relationships is we need emotional safety. And that emotional safety comes from being able to hold space for both the I'm a provider and also I can be here empathetically and emotionally with you and hold space for you from that more feminine perspective. And oftentimes what I have, even in the work that I do, and you had mentioned this, men and women, to be fair, there are many of us who we struggle to name what those emotions are. But that is the key, I think, when you were talking about, okay, what makes a real man? I do think that part of it is learning that emotions are extraordinarily important. They're data packets, and becoming more and more comfortable with learning what is happening for you emotionally, and then also learning how to communicate it to your partner.
Yeah, that's fascinating in so many ways. Women clamor for this from men all the time. They want emotional availability. They want men to listen. And as is well documented on this show, those are two phenomena that are widely misunderstood by men. It's like we're not really wired that way. But probably the most fascinating part, to me at least, about what you just said is you really keyed on emotional safety.
Yeah.
Now, I think most guys would immediately think of physical safety in the context of being a provider and a bringer of safety and security in general. Because, hey, you know what? If I can make sure no one comes and rapes and pillages our family, if I can make enough money for our family to survive and have a few extra things on the side, then everybody's going to feel physically safe and I'll have done my job as a dude. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, as you tell it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So help these guys figure this out.
Well, because yes to physical safety, but then there's psychological safety, right? There's you as my partner can feel what you feel, but even beyond that, you can have the thoughts that you have, and you can have an opinion, and you can have a voice. And within all of that, there is safety, right? You get to be safe as your own person. And that's the psychological safety part. That's the emotional safety part that we have not talked enough about in relationships. I'm not disputing physical safety 100%. We want to feel physically safe, but also we need emotional safety in these relationships.
Well, in all fairness, I think a lot of people, especially in Western culture, assume physical safety.
Yeah.
Like, hey, nothing bad's going to happen. We're pretty good. We got a job. We're not dirt poor. We live in the first world here. It's all good from that perspective. If anything, that gives us more time to kind of ascend Maslow's hierarchy of needs there and start talking about those emotional needs, the esteem needs, et cetera, et cetera. Where I think a lot of men and women really fumble the football together is when in doubt, they shut up instead of talking about it. Now, I don't think you're going to be able to talk your way out of lack of attraction or a major breach. And for sure, I understand that sometimes talking gets in the way of a real solution. But clamming up and giving each other the cold shoulder and the silent treatment definitely doesn't help. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. And also, I want to say that when we're talking about emotional safety, sometimes people will clam up because of that lack of emotional safety, right?
Yes.
They don't feel that they can share how they actually feel or what they're thinking, and so then they clam up. And when you clam up, now we're avoiding the actual conversation and we're not having honest conversation with each other. And then all of a sudden, both people in the relationship lift their head up and they're like, why is this not working? Well, it's because they have not felt safe with one another to actually have true conversation about what's working and what's not.
And those feelings can be complicated and really hard to put your finger on if you're feeling them, can't they?
Oh, gosh, yeah. And especially if you've been in a position of running away from your feelings most of your life. I mean, when we think about it, and again, through my work, time and time again, this comes up is, the messages we receive as kids around certain emotions is those emotions are not okay. Or, for instance, if a guy is sad, they're taught pretty early on that, you have to be brave. I mean, you're a guy, you don't need to cry. What is this about sadness? Move on. But actually the sadness itself is so important because it gives you information on either a need you have or a value that's not being met. And can you imagine what difference that would make in a relationship where you can actually talk to your partner about the fact that you are feeling sad and then put words to what the sadness is telling you need, and actually be able to have a conversation with your partner about a request you may have. And then you guys can have an honest dialogue about it. How different is that than just running away from the sadness, pretending it doesn't exist? Over time, it eats away at you, and then you have complete disconnection with your partner.
I think the number one rule to follow here, and it sounds like you'd probably agree with me, is that bottling anything up is the kiss of death over time.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the kiss of death. Any type of avoidance or bottling it up and pretending it doesn't exist. I mean, it will work for a certain amount of time, but eventually it's going to bubble up.
It's nice if in the moment you're holding yourself back from saying something you don't mean and won't be able to take back. I mean, it's a measure of maturity to be able to not blurt out something in the moment that's irresponsible. But over days, weeks, and months, it's absolutely the killer of relationships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. There's a difference between blurting something out without actually thinking it through and then actually sharing with your partner what it is that you are thinking or feeling, and having a dialogue around that.
Yeah, sure. But in the interest of curtailing this black and white thinking we've already established as being a big part of most male existence, I figured it would be worth it at least to throw that out on the table.
Totally. We are not advocating blurting out every thought that comes into your head.
Yes, we're not that ADHD, hopefully, as adults. Or at least if we are, we're seeing someone about it. Now, here's a situation that I think a lot of guys find themselves in. I want to be a provider. I want to be a protector. She really pissed me off. But I know if I tell her I'm pissed off, maybe she'll feel like she's got her feet pressed to the fire, or I'm kind of buttonholing her, or we're going to start an argument, or it's going to be, I didn't do that. Yes, you did. And I just don't want to go there because I'm a man and I'm a peacekeeper and I like calm and I like my routine, which a lot of guys fit that description. We don't want to upset the apple cart. I got my little deal going on here. I got my setup. I got my wife. I got my garage. I got my Corvette. I got my job I go to. I got my buddies I drink beer with. I got my TV shows that I watch. I'm good. And a lot of women are a lot more okay, I would say. Not eager or excited to, but they'll upset the apple cart, so to speak, if it needs to. And a lot of times guys don't understand that. And that's when they'll kind of either try to assuage the woman, which feels insulting to her, right? Or pass it off as not being a big deal, or flat out run away from it. But part of being a good husband, a good father, a real man, if you will, is dealing with things that come up rather than sticking your head in the sand. And that's a little bit different than just bottling something up. I think there are guys who are avoidant, not only in terms of letting their emotions out, but doing anything that feels like it would not be pleasant. And as men, I think we need to access that dark side and do what we got to do, even if it isn't pretty. And wouldn't you say women are depending on us for that?
Absolutely. Really that avoidance it actually is the opposite of creating emotional safety with your partner, right? So if you are afraid that your wife is going to be upset by you bringing something up, I mean, just think about that. We're bottling it up over years and just the time that evolves. Like, she's going to be even more upset when eventually it comes out, probably not the way that we could have addressed it in the very first go round. I am a huge advocate of Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, especially for those of us who are afraid of conflict. As a people pleaser myself, this is something I've had to learn, which is, all conflict does not mean bad. Conflict can mean growth. And Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication gives the ability to have a conversation that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it recenters it back on making an observation. I've noticed that when XYZ happens, this is how I feel. And the feeling tells me this is what I need. And then through that, we can make a request of our partner. That way of communicating with our partner alleviates a lot of the defense, or putting our partner on the defensive, because it takes away from you statements. And the thing that we have to remember when we're communicating with somebody is the moment we start going into you statements, it is natural for the other person to be on the defensive, because they hear a you statement, they go into fight or flight, and they feel like they need to defend themselves. So it is, as you are working towards building a really connected relationship with your partner, learning things like, how can I communicate in a way that doesn't feel so obtrusive to my partner as well as to myself. Those are things to learn. That's how you can step into that real manhood, which is I'm not going to avoid the thing. I'm going to learn the things that allow me to create this connection with my partner.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there about this sort of blueprint that you spoke of for how to do this. How can I have a conflict with my significant other, or with anybody, really? I mean, part of being a real man is dealing with other men and with your children, parenting, being a professional, even in your social life. All of that falls under the heading of real manhood when our masculine is in its most virtuous state. I think a lot of guys, once they know what to do, are happy to do it. What men probably fear the most, Kamini, is fear itself.
Yeah.
To kind of invoke FDR, because we don't want to look afraid. We don't want to look scared. And when we don't have a plan, then we're scared of looking stupid, doing that which we already feel stupid even attempting. It's kind of a meta level thing. So if we have a blueprint for how to handle human conflict, and indeed we've had other guests on. We haven't had Marshall on the show. Maybe I should look into that. But we've had other guests talk about that, including one of my favorite mentors all time, which was Dr. Mark Goldston. That was kind of his bailiwick,
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely it is true that a lot of men, what holds us back is fear. Fear of looking stupid, fear of making a mistake, fear of failure, right?
Yes.
And even procrastination, putting off anything, bottling up anything, waiting on anything is really a fear of a potential negative outcome. That's what procrastination is really about. It's almost never about laziness, although it can be. But when men fear anything, we're going to back off from stepping up and being real men. And, it's a lot to ask. I mean, if you look back on David Data's book, Way of the Superior Man, my goodness, most guys read that, and the reports I've heard is this dude thinks I've got to be perfect, because if I mess up even once, my significant other, the woman in my life who I love, is just going to walk and find another dude. And that was a lot of pressure to put on a guy. And providing and protecting is already kind of replete with enough pressure without us pressuring ourselves more. So having this roadmap, kind of having a plan of action, like in case of emergency, break glass kind of action.
That's right.
Sounds like a pretty good plan. Tell us more.
Well, I do believe having blueprints and ways of handling things, not just for men, but many of us have these fears. But, having a plan of action, and I 100% agree with you that there is fear that keeps us from speaking up, whether it's fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of just somebody's going to be angry at me. The way that we also can work through that, and I offer up, is it's a challenge, but being able to complete that thought loop. Oftentimes we stop at the fear. I'm afraid that this is going to happen, but we don't complete the thought loop and say, okay, and then what, right? So my wife is mad at me, or my child is upset with me, and then what? Well, the world is going to keep turning. and I just need to figure out my next step after that. Right.
So we hit analysis paralysis and then we bottle it up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like,
Great.
nope. Because we were afraid, and the fear immediately says, okay, nope, not going to go there. And so then we bottle it up. We're doing the opposite of creating actual authentic connection with the people in our life. And so it really does come down to what steps can I take in order to communicate what I need to communicate? And so I just love the simplicity of this nonviolent communication, because it really does allow us to say, okay, this is what I'm observing. Like you were mentioning, your example was like, oh, well, my wife pissed me off. And so, but I can't tell her because she's going to be upset. We'll go back to what happened, just without judgment, observe what happened. How did I feel? And what does that feeling tell me I need? And now we can have a conversation with our wife and simply say, I noticed when XYZ happened, I felt frustrated because really what I need is, fill in the blank, and then make the request of your wife. In none of that have we told her or even alluded to the fact that she is a bad person. And we're really just asking for her help.
Not that she won't invent that on her own.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Is that we have zero control over that, but at least we're offering the ability to have that honest conversation. Because really what happens when we make a request of the other person, that person now has an invitation to say, yes, I can meet that request, or I can't do that, but I can do this. And now we're in honest dialogue with the other person. And that's ultimately how we create that sense of emotional safety, is we're having honest conversation with each other.
I think that's right on the money. Now let's really throw a wrench in the machine. Guys, whether they're already consciously aware of this and about to come with torches and pitchforks unless I bring it up, some other guys may be oblivious to the fact that this happens in their lives. But it's sort of a major quandary in relationships, whether we're conscious of it or not. Men lately, especially if we really want to be masculine and we're kind of railing against this whole idea of masculinity as a social construct, and you can define it as you wish, and it's whatever you want, wear a skirt, act like a girl, whatever. Guys who really want to rail against that, but also are good dudes and they want to come off like a hero instead of a villain, which is what most guys want to do, right? We want to provide and protect, are kind of trying to figure out what's okay to express and what makes me look like a weakling. Because, weakness has got to be toxic, even if being violent and overbearing and a narcissist is toxic as well. How do I get the job done being a provider of safety and security while kind of straddling that fence, which sounds really painful if you slip and fall, especially for a dude, right? Straddling a fence. How do I not, bust my balls in my relationship with a woman by saying or doing the wrong thing? What if there are things I can blurt out even when I'm calm that would really harm this relationship? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're really not feeling as resilient as you feel like you've usually been. Let's say you've taken some losses lately and it's starting to really hurt. And maybe your wife's already noticed that you're drinking a little bit more Maker's Mark at night than you used to. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're starting to pack on a few lbs. The stress is getting at you. A lot of women won't interfere with a man going about his business of being a man because, it's either out of fear, I don't want to piss him off or feel like I'm nagging him, or they just don't feel like it's their job. I'm the one he's providing and protecting. I'm not the one who's supposed to be bringing up anything about his well-being. A lot of women will let their guy get unhealthy, get unhappy. And it seems to the woman, at least, and I'm not pillaring women here. I'm not demonizing them or even saying that it's wrong. It's just they really just don't know how to talk to a man who they feel might be in crisis, either because they're living the fairy tale of this guy can't be in crisis. After all, he's a man. These are the same women who may watch, say, the first 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan and roll their eyes and go, boys, why do they like doing that? So here's a guy, he's suffering in his own private hell where he's feeling like a loser. He's feeling like he's failing. He has failed. And a lot of guys, especially listening to this show, are high achievers. I talked to man after man who was raised in an environment where they weren't allowed to fail. I talked to a guy who's an Olympian the other day, and you betcha that's how he was raised, right? The Olympic Games or bust was the goal. And even after he made it, he still felt the pressure, right? So you have a lot of guys who are used to winning. They're told that's what men do. Men compete Everything's competition in the eyes of a male human being, whether women like it or even recognize it. That's how we feel. There's no changing it. It's in our DNA. It's all about providing and protecting, by the way, from a primal perspective, kind of an archetype. And then when we feel like we failed at that, when we feel like we haven't done what we could do, when we feel like we're struggling, we feel like we're at the dead end and we don't know what else to do, that stress piles up to the point where we may even lose the desire to live anymore. But the quandary guys face is we just can't tell our wives, because then it would prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're weaklings and we lack resilience, and she's going to lose attraction for us because we're not providing and protecting anymore. So I just have to keep my nose to the grindstone and figure it out all alone, or else it's going to be worse if I treat it any other way. It'll be worse if I talk to her about it. It'll be worse if I get vulnerable. I think a lot of guys are nodding their head out there saying to themselves, yeah, man, you just nailed it. You get it. That's my situation. Or saying to themselves, yeah, I've been there before and it was a real pit to dig out of. As a woman, what would you say to a guy who's feeling like that?
First of all, I completely understand and resonate. I've had the privilege of clients share very similar stories with me like that. And I would say, number one, I totally validate the thoughts and the feelings. And the second part I would challenge them with is, how is that working for you? Meaning, we're down the rabbit hole of drinking more, eating more, feeling worse and worse. By not speaking up, is that really working? That would be the first question.
Well, do we have to speak up to our wives, or do we need a buddy to speak up to, or see a therapist, or how does that factor in directly to our relationship with our wives or girlfriends?
So sometimes sometimes for people, it is about getting support first and building out and unpacking the false narratives, because what I hear underneath all of that is that false belief that struggling or, like you were mentioning before, failing are not okay. Those are all false beliefs. So being able to first bring that up into the awareness, because that's the first part that needs to be worked through. So sometimes it is going and seeking support from an outsider first, not because you can't speak to your wife or there's not a deep relationship and connection there, but sometimes we need the space with a third party to be able to unpack those things. But ultimately, it is about, first of all, validating where those feelings are coming from, and then really challenging what's actually true. If I continue down this and don't share this with my wife, what type of a relationship am I actually building? Right? Even as a parent, if I don't communicate with my children and I'm not authentic with what I'm feeling or what's going on for me, how am I really showing up as a leader? Because at the end of the day, as parents, we really are just leaders. And so often, when I talk about this a lot when I talk about mindful parenting, so often we are parenting from a place where we're not really fully aware of what's happening for ourselves. And so we have to take the time to recognize, these are either the emotions I'm having or the false narratives that I'm telling myself, work through it for ourselves first, so that then we can show up in truthful conversation with our kids. And the same thing goes for our relationships. If we're going to show up as a real man or a real woman, it doesn't matter which side of the coin we're on there. We have to pay attention to what's coming up for ourselves and then being willing to share that with our partner. Ultimately, that is how we show up as a real partner in these relationships.
I want to underscore how reassuring your words are to the men who are listening. That was just a fantastic answer. I think a lot of guys were fearing the worst in that answer, and I think you've shown them the best of what they can expect. There's a time and a place to admit you've got issues, to ask for help. And it's not the end of the world to ask for help of your own significant other. It won't make you look weak. If anything, it'll make you look like you're human. And perhaps if you're really lucky, or fortunate, I should say, it'll actually take pressure off your wife and kids to have to be perfect themselves because of the image you projected of this ersatz perfection, which a lot of dads do.
Yep.
And meanwhile, they're bottling up this deep pain, as I just described. But, what I'm coming to the conclusion of is the word balance, once again, like it does in plenty of conversations, is key here. We don't want to be ultra stoic and I don't need anybody's help and, I don't need anybody and you just go away, leave me alone, let me figure it out, is a lot different than being a sniveling mess without any hope and, looking for a sugar mama to take care of you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
As you mentioned before, there's a lot of gray area in between, And you could describe that a whole lot of different ways. Great conversation. I want to ask you before we close, are there any other ideas or strategies or even simple thoughts you want to give guys about what it takes to be a real man in a woman's eyes that maybe go above and beyond what we talked about already?
It's not really above and beyond, but it's really to drive home this idea that paying attention to your feelings is not weak. It's actually going to create a lot of power and strength and be that real man that you want to be. Because when you can name what you're feeling, you can really, truly emotionally connect with your partner. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is that true connection with one another.
And the mic drop there is how a lot of women think about a real man is within the framework of what you just described. And it's exactly what most of us as men are trying to run away from, thinking it's not manly. It's so ironic and crazy. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. And Kamini, I want to send guys to your website, kaminiwood.com, which you can also get to, guys, by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/wood. And would you tell us, Kamini, what they're going to find when they get there?
Go over to my website, kaminiwood.com. There are plenty of blog posts around different topics, including ones on this very topic, as well as nonviolent communication. So plenty to read. There's definitely a way to connect with me there. And of course, if it's not my website, Facebook, Instagram, you'll find me there too at It's Authentic Me.
It's Authentic Me. Outstanding. So guys, head to mountaintoppodcast.com/wood. And if you would like, you can also go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon and pick up a copy of Kamini Wood's book, Om, Life's Gentle Reminders. Kamini Wood is a human potential coach from North Carolina. And Kamini, I appreciate you coming on for the second time. Hope to have you on again, well, sooner than 4 years from now, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, you're quite welcome so much. And gentlemen, if you haven't been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, please visit our 3 longtime sponsors, including Origin in Maine, that's Jocko Willink's company, Hero Soap, and the guys over at the Keyport. When you partake of anything from our 3 fine longtime sponsors, you will get 10% off your order when you use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10. Also, gentlemen, get in on the master classes. We've done 3.5 years worth of them at this point. The catalog is wow, just replete with wonderful topics on how to be a better man. What the master classes are about is typically on the last Wednesday of the month, we get together as a live group of men and really, really hammer home a major talking point, a major sticking point, if you will, about what it takes to be a better man and be better with women. And yes, we've come up with 36 different topics so far, and we're still rolling. There's always plenty of ways to improve, plenty of ways to get better as a man. So definitely check out the catalog of masterclasses at mountaintoppodcast.com/masterclass. And of course, don't forget to check out all the other goodies that are always waiting for you at the newly revamped mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.